Hi, I'm Alex Newman with the New American, and today I want to talk to you about the witch hunt being waged by a group of rogue attorneys general across the United States against so-called climate deniers, the new heretics of our age because they don't support the anthropogenic global warming theory, anthropogenic being man-made. So as many of you have probably heard, there is this new coalition of attorneys general, state attorneys general, who have launched so-called investigations into alleged fraud perpetrated by alleged climate deniers, people who don't believe the global warming theory, which, as we've shown many times in the magazine, in the New American, is really a sad theory, and it's it's essentially discredited. It has no weight anymore. The evidence is completely against it. If you'd like to see more, check out some of the articles we have in the New American on this subject. But of course, these climate alarmists and the globalists behind this theory, they realize they're losing, right? There was a Pew poll came out, I think a year or two ago, that said just 40% of Americans believe the global warming theory, that man's emissions of whatever greenhouse gases are supposedly driving this climate change, this global warming. So to deal with that, the attorneys general, they call themselves the Attorneys General United for Clean Power, they've decided to use law enforcement powers. And so they started out by going after ExxonMobil, the big mean old oil company, the corporate member of the Council on Foreign Relations, who doesn't want to pick on oil companies, right? Those rich fat cats smoking their cigars. And because allegedly ExxonMobil knew about global warming and didn't tell its investors and so on and so forth. Now, of course, this is bogus. Exxon has actually filed some countersuits here. But what happened after that is even more troubling. They started subpoenaing and persecuting all of the nonprofit groups that allegedly had something to do with this alleged climate denial. So now we have state attorneys general purporting to investigate fraud and going after the free speech of people who question and debunk their silly little theory. So this is a gross abuse of law enforcement powers, of government powers. And now, here's the good news, it's kind of blown up in their face, actually, in a major way, actually in several major ways. And we'll talk about some of those. First, you had a number of very prominent voices coming out and saying that this needed to stop. You had a professor of law at the University of Tennessee who wrote in the biggest newspaper by circulation in the United States that these attorneys general were engaged in a criminal conspiracy to deprive their victims of their First Amendment constitutionally protected free speech rights. So this statute carries very, very heavy prison sentences for people who violate it, and there's also civil penalties. So some of the victims of this witch hunt are welcome to use the court system to sue these attorneys general for conspiring against their free speech rights. So that's strike one on the witch hunt, guys. Then you had the Competitive Enterprise Institute, one of the alleged climate denial factories that was subpoenaed by one of these attorneys general, Mr. Claude Walker down in the Virgin Islands. And now he is in some trouble in the court. They're trying to get him slapped with sanctions and fines for pestering and for harassing and for trying to chill free speech. So he's in a little bit of trouble himself. Now we have another coalition of attorneys general, more sensible ones, who have come out and said, well, hey, wait a minute here. If minimizing the alleged threat of alleged global warming is fraud, certainly exaggerating the threat of alleged global warming has got to be fraud. And of course, they're right? I mean, if allegedly minimizing this alleged threat is fraud, then certainly the opposite would also be fraud. And as it happens, we have tons of evidence that the other side, the global warming alarmists, have been committing fraud. If you go back to ClimateGate, for example, we have emails that were leaked out of these institutions showing that these guys were conspiring to hide the decline in temperatures and to violate freedom of information laws because they didn't want to share their data and they didn't want to get caught. So we have some very serious evidence of fraud here. It just happens to be on the other side. So whether these attorneys general will pursue that fraud, I don't know. I personally think that they ought to look at it and see what's going on there, because this fraud was perpetrated with public money. This fraud was designed to pursue a number of very dangerous policies for humanity. You have people like former NASA climatologist Roy Spencer saying that these are Nazi global warming alarmists and that their policies literally threaten the lives of millions of people. So I certainly think there's something worth pursuing there. And then now we have the House of Representatives getting involved. We have one of the congressional committees subpoenaing these attorneys general to find out what they've been up to. These attorneys general, the ones united for clean power, have been hiding behind a little agreement that they cooked up between themselves and their Rockefeller-funded allies. And so now that little veil of secrecy is going to be pierced, and we'll get a closer look at what these global warming alarmists and their allies in government have been up to. So it's an encouraging time to be alive. It's an encouraging time to be a global warming skeptic or realist, whatever you want to call it, because the evidence of the global warming hoax is collapsing. I mean, just everywhere you look, the evidence is imploding. We have almost 20 years now with no global warming, according to the satellite record, and yet every single United Nations climate model that they use in their IPCC report predicted warming as CO2 concentrations increased. So this is exciting. We're witnessing the implosion of a major globalist establishment narrative, and we're witnessing the blowing up in the faces of these attorneys general who tried to persecute the people exposing their fraudulent theory. So, you know, this has been tried before. Stalin tried this. There was a very strange fellow there who came up with a scientific theory, Mr. Lysenko, and he insisted that his theory was correct, and Stalin insisted also, and so they used the full terror apparatus of the Soviet Union to persecute the people who pointed out that the theory was ridiculous. But in the end, the truth came out anyway. So I expect that to happen here, and we can all look forward to that. But in the meantime, take a look at what's happening here, and if you're in one of the states where the Attorney General is persecuting people for what they say, for their scientific inquiry, you should get involved. And even if you don't, write to your member of Congress. Ask what is going on now in America where we have supposed law enforcement officials abusing their power, abusing their office to harass people who point out flaws in a silly scientific theory. So thanks very much. Check out The New American for more information.